If you're going to get into Locus Fleet Commanders, something that you may want to get to grips with is shipbuilding. The actual construction of your warships is a rather large part of the game. In the rulesbook there is a graphic showing exactly how to piece the ships together. However, with all the different ship types and weapon options and cosmetics you can get, you can be forgiven for getting a bit confused if you're new to the game. So to start off, warships in Locus are very modular. You have the main hull of ship, and this will be its classification, be it a spear class, a scimitar, an intrepid class. And you have all the statistics for that classification of ship. I'll go into more detail about actually piecing together the ship soon. I have a video for that. I think the first thing I want to get into though is the actual points cost, like tallying up points of your ship. You see, is you have the main hull of your ship, and that will be a certain number of points. And then the specific ship classes will then have a weapon slot. And from there you have a select number of weapons that you can choose from. This in the rules book is the weapon options section. And so once you've chosen which classification of ship you want, let's say you want a good old trusty scimitar class light cruiser, that is 180 points and gets one large and one single weapon slot. You then pick which weapon out of the large weapon slots you want. Let's say we want broadside guns. We then add the points cost of the broadside guns onto our base hull points cost of 180, and the broadside guns have a points cost of 60, so that would bring us up to 240 points. But we also have a single weapon slot, of which we have two options for that, the OT-32M or the OT-85RF. If we want rapid fire capabilities, it's better to go for the OT-85RF, but if we want something more hard hitting, we'd go for the OT-32M. Let's say we want to go for the OT-32M, well that's an extra 10 points, bringing the total points cost of our scimitar light cruiser to 250. And that just generally is how you select your weapons. But there are some things to note. The first thing to note is that the ship must be symmetrical. You'll notice that the slots are evenly on both sides of the hull. This is because a ship must be symmetrical, so like if you put, let's say, broadside guns on one side, they have to be on the other side as well, but they only count as one weapon. So even though there are, you have to attach it to both sides of the ship, it still only counts as a single weapon slot. The next thing to note is that all weapon slots must be filled with some kind of weapon, except from single weapon slots. These single weapon slots are the only weapon slots that you can just leave blank and not put anything in. And of course, on certain ships, weapon slots may be pushed together. You'll see this on the Valiant class light cruiser or the Scepter class heavy cruiser. The slot section is very wide, but that's just because it's made for two to go in side by side. There are also prow mounted weaponry. Prow mounted is also completely optional because it's just a different kind of prow. Well, from all except the Kyrill, that is. Mainly because the Kyrill don't have any kinds of prow without a weapon attached to it. But yes, prow weaponry is also optional. And once you've decided what weaponry you want for it, once you've decided its points cost, you can then 3D print it off. Now, I'm not going to explain how to 3D print these, you can just look at some other channel on how to 3D print stuff. But I will say that some of the weaponry does need to be mirrored in your slicer. Mainly either side-mounted weaponry or stuff like fighter launchers need to be mirrored, which is very simple to do, it's just pressing the right button. And after choosing your weapons, then it's a matter of just choosing your cosmetics. Now, this is entirely just down to what you think looks nice. Not all, but some ships just have different cosmetic designs. So some may have multiple different kinds of prows, for example. You may like prow 1 for your scimitar, but you may like prow 4 even better. And then to print off the ship, it's just one of each, just one prow, one midship, one stern, and one bridge. Although, so with some ships, the bridge is a part of the stern. And with some other ships, the midship is part of the prow. So, but those are mainly like smaller ships like destroyers or frigates. I will also say that with frigates, the weapon options aren't in the weapon options selection like they are with most other ships, rather they're usually built into the midship. They still function exactly the same as medium weapon ports with all the same statistics, so you don't need to worry about that. But with those little quirks out of the way, it is just a matter of printing one of each piece to build the ship. And then after you've printed off all your weapons, you've printed off the main hull of the ship, you can then just piece it together. Now, with the graphics I provided, that should be obvious, but for any of you trogs who may need a helping hand, here's a video of me actually piecing one together. Probably should have cleaned my desk for this, but I'm not going to do that. So I thought it would be useful that I might put together a sort of instruction guide on how to actually piece together the ships. There are instructions in the rules book on it, and it's not particularly hard, though I thought it might be useful for some people for me to explain it. So the first thing that will be very clear to anyone is that there are three major sections to your ship, which would be the stern, the midship, and the prow. Now, on some ships it is different. For example, destroyers will usually only have the stern and the prow, although it may be more apt to call it the bow in that situation. And on all ships it'll be very simple to put together. Usually almost they tend to just slot in, where they'll have little slots, but on some, especially the Carpathian ships, it tends to just be a flat surface where you just shove it together like that, and I would glue it. So I'm going to glue all of this stuff, but if you really wanted to, because there are cosmetic options. So what we're building here is a Spear class battle cruiser, and this is prow number 3 for it that I'll be using today. However, there are different kinds of prows. For example, if I grab another prow that we have for it, you have this one, which I believe is prow number 1. You could use that, and it doesn't matter what prow you use, those are just cosmetic options. But if you really wanted to, let me find it now, we're over here, wrecking the place. You could use magnets to magnetize them if you wanted to just swap them out. But for sections like the prow or the midship or the stern, these are just cosmetic options and don't actually affect gameplay. Now the weapons, which we have a weapon selection here, do affect gameplay, but we'll get onto them in a minute. But for now, I'm just going to glue these together. Now, of course, this should go without saying, the midship will usually be the one with the peg hole. Sometimes it's the stern on certain ships, but it's usually the midship with the peg hole that goes into the stand here. But if we just glue this together, we just put a bit of glue on there and then push that together. It is not playing nice with me here. Now, what kind of glue you use, because I'm sure that's a question someone's going to ask. The kind of glue you use really depends on how you're 3D printing these. I'm just using, this was on just a general FDM printer, so this is just PLA plastic, which I'm just using this all-purpose adhesive, but the kind of glue you use is going to be very much dependent on what exact material you're printing off, which is for you as the viewer to decide. From there, most ships also have the bridge separate of course your command deck. That will you just go on top of the stern. This also has a slot that runs along there, and the slot, we just put some glue down there. Spread that out a bit. And the bridge so line this up correctly, can sit on top like that, and that is the majority of the hull, like the vast majority of the ship. Done up. What's left now is the weapon options, which I have over here. Now, it's probably a good idea to paint the ship before you put the weapon options on. I know some people like you should paint all parts individually before assembling it, but those people are wrong, and so we want to apply the weapon options first. Now, with most weapon options, they'll be very simple. So these huge cutouts of the ship are where these large weapon ports go. And most of them are very simple. See, these, which are I believe in the rules book, they are the OT-22M, are just a single piece, a weapons battery that just slot into the side here. Like so. But some weaponry, you will have like weapons ports, weapons batteries for them. Such as this. So these are OT type 1 weapons, where they have a separate piece that is glued on top of there. Let me just put these in. This is another section, because I'm gluing these in, but once again, you can just drill a hole in here and put magnets in order to have these magnetized, should you want the ability to change out the weapon options. But as I was saying earlier, these ports are not where you would add these smaller guns, these smaller laser batteries. Now, here I'm going to answer a couple questions that I think may come up while you're here. In the rules book, you'll notice for a lot of the energy weapons, they're labelled Type 1, Type 2, Type 3. What does that actually mean? Well, it's just about the range of the weapon. So these OT Type 1s, the Type 1 means it's longest distance. If you'll look at the brackets of ranges, the power of the weapon, then it's the Type 1 means that the first number in that is going to be the strongest type. So Type 1 is long range, Type 3 is short range, Type 2 is just medium range. Oh, it's falling apart on me. And after we have all the large weapons in, notice that we have one little gun left we're going to add in. That's the single weapon port, and that is this little hole right here. Now, the weapon port is usually on, it's just where this hole generally is. Now, in the rules, the single weapon port is the only port that you can leave empty. These larger weapon ports, you have to put something in, and you can choose anything from the large weapon sections to put in here. So if you wanted 2 of these OT-22Ms, 2 sets of them, you could. If you want 2 of these OT Type 1s, the laser weapons, you could just have 2 sets of those. It is perfectly up to you how you actually lay out the weaponry of the ship, but the single weapon ports, which are like these small cannons that go on top of your ship, those can be left blank, so those aren't necessary to have. And now that we've glued it all together, we just have to wait for the glue to dry before we can start painting it up. Now, I'm going to interject here because this is the point where I tried to make a painting tutorial part of this video, but I'm absolutely terrible at painting, and so I don't think that's my place to make a painting tutorial. So I'll just give you a very quick, nice rundown on how to paint them. First off is mainly picking a colour, and you can just paint them whatever you want. There are no rules against certain kinds of paint schemes. There are in-universe paint schemes, of course, of which there are a few presented in the rules book. However, in-universe there are millions of paint schemes across the millions of ships present in the galaxy, so you can just paint them whatever you want and it'll probably be somewhat lore accurate. So you can just settle on a colour scheme that feels right for you. But generally the way I would paint them is to first off obviously pick your colour scheme, but what you want to do with your ship is paint it in a colour slightly darker than the colour you want to paint it. Let's say you want to paint it white, well then you should paint it grey first. So you just base the whole thing grey and then paint the white over that, but don't paint it on as much as you painted the grey. Leave some of the more recessed areas and this allows a lot of the details on the ship to show more. And after that you can just paint the armor trim and all the little details whatever colour you want to paint them. I also usually like to use some kind of wash, let's say an oil wash or just a black paint with water kind of wash, in order to seep into the more recessed areas to make the details pop out more. I also tend to paint all the armor trim or the ship details a sort of metallic colour to make it feel more industrial, or sometimes use the gold colours to make it feel more ornamental. But these are just some tips, and really it's all down to your personal choice. But of course my main piece of advice is just to paint them something, to just give them a bit of colour and make them feel more like yours. And with all that said, that'll be it for this video, so please have a nice rest of your day. And be sure to check out my Discord server, in which we could talk about Locus or any of the games that I'm working on. Or just tell me how you feel in the comments, your input is much appreciated. Check out my Patreon if you want access to all the paid for models for Locus Fleet Commander, or if you want to look at many of the free ones, just head over to my Thingiverse account. All the relevant links are in the description. I will see you next time.